guess for an average person, being homeless would be pretty much the worst case scenario. The idea that although you woke up in a certain place, you're not exactly sure where you're gonna sleep that night could freak out anyone. Somehow, I have learned not only to accept the unknown, but to embrace the chaos. Once again, it was me and my backpack against the world. Since I decided not to cross the Atlantic this year, I thought I could see the Eastern Canary Islands, or Madeira, or even sail back to mainland and visit a new country. Either way, the best thing to do was to go back to Tenerife and look for a boat there. I strolled into the Marina office in Santa Cruz de la Palma. The guy who was in charge there told me that there are not many boats leaving east right now. In fact, most of them are coming, because there's gonna be a regatta in 2 weeks. I decided to try my luck anyways, and I went for a round of the docks. Across the water, I saw two guys waving and screaming at me in Spanish. They told me, "Vine por una copa," but I said, "Primero busco, segundo bebo." Most people were out for the day, so it only took me about an hour to talk to every person in the marina. And there were so many Polish boats! I went up to each of them trying to speak Polish, but somehow the nationality of the owners never matched. The Copa guys were also sitting on a boat that supposedly came from Gdynia. The guys were two experienced sailors, Norberto from Lanzarote, and a member of the Spanish Sailing Association, and Miguel from Madeira, speaking fluent Portuñol even after a few drinks. They treated me to rum from La Palma, the best I have ever had. And then they explained the Polish boat situation. In Poland, it's easy and cheap to register a boat. In Spain, for example, they require you to do these yearly checkups. Because of that, half of the boats on the Atlantic have my hometown written on their butts. I spent the rest of that day sitting on their boat and listening to their stories, also sharing some of mine. Whenever a new person would come into the marina, I would run up to them, smiling like a crazy person, but I had no luck. At least every time I came back, I had a fresh portion of rum waiting for me.
Para que el barco te haga así, después que le das atrás, tienes que hacer, le das atrás, hace, quita la marcha y le das todo timón para allí y lo deja y ya está, lo deja.
I'm not really sure when my Spanish improved enough to have a full-on political conversation. I spent almost a decade learning Spanish at school, but the thing is, every time I started a new level of school, I had to start over because they only had beginner Spanish. So I took 3 years of beginner Spanish 3 times. I'm really a master at beginner Spanish. Well, at least on paper, because you know, school is mostly theory. And whenever I tried to speak, there was this weird shame because I could hear all the mistakes that I was making. Not like they bothered anyone else, because Spanish people don't give a fuck. And I'm glad that I tried to speak anyways, because my whole time in the Canary Islands I was treated more like a potential friend than a tourist, because I made the effort to speak and tried to get to know everybody and hear the story of the places where I was. And yeah, first week I could barely get out a sentence, pero aparcado, because there I was 2 months later, successfully expressing my love for traveling and listening to funny stories in Spanish. At the end of the day, Norberto let me stay on his boat, so thankfully my careless homelessness worked out just fine. Next morning, 7 a.m. sharp, I was already sitting in the docks, stopping every passing person like a nosy guard dog. I put my postcards in a nice little spread, and it was a great strategy because people would stop by to ask about the paintings. One guy even bought the rain-destroyed postcard from Tazacorte. Sailors are great people. And before midday, I already found a ride. They were 2 young guys from Switzerland, and they wanted to leave on Thursday, so I had 3 days to spend in the mountains. I was so happy having found a boat with a little extra time that I didn't even get any contact info for the guys, didn't even get their number. I just said, "See you Thursday," and I went to get my backpack from Norberto. When I thanked him for everything and I gave him a postcard, he gave me 2 tortillas for the road. 3 hours later, I was already in Barlovento. I made a plan to go all the way from north of the island to the south, following the trail of the volcanoes. Almost 50 kilometers long with peaks over 2,000 meters. Typical Gosia, trying to make up for a month of laziness with 3 days of hiking, with a full backpack. But the first day turned out to be nice and easy. I felt peaceful and happy walking in the thick forest. As the sun went down, I just found a quiet spot and had a perfectly ratless night. Next morning, I got up at 5 a.m. to see the sunrise. La Palma is a hiking paradise, steep all around, with sharp peaks shooting dramatically in a beautiful arch, far less touristy than other islands. The mountains are what really did it for me. They are spectacular. The trail was almost empty, a bit tricky at times, but so rewarding. I walked the ridge for the whole day, enjoying the breathtaking views on each side. I had Tenerife keeping me company on the eastern horizon, and La Gomera and El Hierro on the south. That day I walked 34 kilometers. Also, with all my gear in the backpack, by the end of it I felt every step in my legs and back. And on top of it, I didn't get as far as planned. If I got to Fuencaliente, I could just take a bus back to the port. But I was exhausted in the middle of nowhere. There was no talking about going all the way to Fuencaliente. There were no buses and it was already getting dark. So my only hope was, again, hitchhiking. In 1 hour, there only passed one car. And thank God they stopped. It turned out that they were going stargazing. La Palma is famous for her clear night sky and perfect astronomical conditions. And you don't even have to go high up into the mountains because there's almost no light pollution. You can visit the famous observatory on Roque de los Muchachos. It's operated by Instituto de Astrofísica de Canarias. Or you can book a stargazing tour and enjoy the view from a rented telescope. I found myself in the middle of such tour, exhausted and smelling like 2 days of sweat. I used my last bit of energy for a little bit of socializing and I got right back to the marina. The driver was an Italian businessman who just could not comprehend how I was able to travel, let alone live, for so cheap. We laughed that comfort is a kind of currency people don't really talk about. So I was back in Santa Cruz and I was homeless again. But I figured out that Norberto is not gonna mind if I sleep on the deck of his boat. Next morning, I met up with the Swiss guys, who still wanted to take me, but there was no wind. So we had to wait 1 extra day, and I could have stayed in the mountains. That's boat life for you. Your schedule is dictated by the wind. But there was a silver lining. Carolina, a friend that I met thanks to Andy, works in the city. We met up when she finished work and went to her house, still my favorite one on the island. Carolina is a bit of a creative badass. She's been traveling most of her life, catching artsy gigs wherever she went. In La Palma, she lived in a really cool, fully furnished cave for years before moving into the little house. To thank her for dinner and accommodation, I wanted to do something. She had some extra chairs laying around, so I painted this. We were supposed to leave the port at 9, but if you know anything about Spanish public transport, you won't be surprised that my bus didn't come at all. I didn't want to risk waiting for another one, so once again, I was left with hitchhiking. I stood hopelessly on the side of the road, already imagining the boat leaving without me, and what do you know? Roman was driving to work in Santa Cruz. He had a tour to guide coming from the cruise ship, so he was going exactly to the port, and it was the perfect goodbye. Boarding my sailboat for the day, I waved to Miguel and Norberto. It took me 2 months of ups and downs to adjust to this weird, messy style of traveling. But with the wind in my hair, doing 7 knots at crosswind, it felt so right. My heart was filled with peaceful confidence and the universe seemed to confirm it. For the first time in my life, I saw dolphins playing with the boat. Yes, Andy, they exist. Any sailor will tell you, dolphins are a good sign. El Teide on the horizon seemed so majestic and slightly bigger with each hour. Smiling to myself, I thought, I'm gonna climb this mountain. I don't know how yet, but I'm gonna do it. Oops.